Is this project, are you planning it to be many books? Is it going to be a long series, or is it just maybe like a trilogy or something?
Yeah, for now, it's just a trilogy.
Mhm.
I'm planning it in a way that the story that I want to tell with this trilogy is going to be self-contained.
Mhm.
I might explore more story. I mean, I will explore more stories in the larger world, but this story ends with this. I don't want people to have to read like three trilogies to make sense of the next one or anything like
Mhm.
that. And I think that's something that Sanderson did really well with his initial Cosmo books, because Mistborn, Elantris, Warbreaker, Stormlight, all of them are relatively self-contained, right? Like it's only after the end of Era 2 of Mistborn where things have started, like the gloves are off and
Mhm.
everything is a lot more Cosmere aware right now.
Yeah.
But if you really want to enjoy Mistborn, you can just read Era 1 and it's a fantastic trilogy by itself.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I want to do, but I don't want anything to be overwhelming because there's too many books to read out there. And I mean, Marvel's facing that problem right now, right? Like they're
Mhm.
in what, phase 5 or phase 6, and
Yeah.
it's all over the place right now.
Yeah.
I don't want to end up like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's where Sanderson's being pretty smart. He's very slowly, which is similar to like the first phase of Marvel. It's very slow. There wasn't a lot of connections at first, but yeah, Marvel's definitely just kind of starting to implode on itself from just like the weight of what they created. And so, yeah, I think Marvel will eventually maybe find their way, but it's definitely something to think about if you're creating a longer story of like how do these connect, and then how much connection is a good thing, you know? Yeah. Do so what's the favorite part of the writing process for you? So do you like working on characters, world building, creating a magic system? Like, is there a particular part that's like, this is where I like to start with?
Uh, Characters is where I start with, and plot is where I have the most fun with.
Hmm.
Like for me, creating characters is something that uh, I mean, I always think of weird scenarios that I have these random people in, and the way these people react to that scenario is what ends up being my character.
Hmm.
Like with Help My Dog, it was an incident I saw right there, and then I put in my anxiety in that situation, and that's what snowballed into my book. Similarly, like in Abandoned by the Gods, there's one the character of Jagdasi that I mentioned, who happened to be inspired by Theresen Paran. That is a story I'd read about. Like there is an actual system of Devdasis in India where I don't think it's still happening, or maybe it is in very remote places. But women were essentially, I don't want to say sold to the temples, but they dedicated their lives to the temple.
Hmm.
And yeah, it started off as a practice of devotion, but then eventually, as with everything, corruption ended up ruining it. And
Hmm.
that was the story I wanted to explore. That I found to be a very interesting story. So I took this one random character, just an innocent girl who ends up in this vicious system of horror. And yeah, it's just a story that you see unfold through her eyes and her losing faith and just becoming that powerful entity and by manipulating the people around her and finding out that she herself is being manipulated in different ways and just understanding the politics of it, understanding the power dynamics between different people and what power and influence even is for practically nobody to learn and then like become the epitome of it. That was a story I wanted to tell. So there in this one story, it ended up being the concept first, then came the character, and then the plot. And when I say I have the most fun with plot, it's because like I get to experience the entire story in like a miniature because I use Figma because I find that to be the easiest for me. I just like make notes, I put them all around, and then I play around with them.
Hmm.
It's kind of like playing with a whiteboard, except it's on my laptop. If you see, I think one of my recent blog posts, I did have a blurred screenshot of what I have planned for my next book. It's still untitled, but I'm structuring it similar to Stormlight Archive, where I have 5 books separated by interludes and bookended by a prologue and an epilogue. But
Hmm.
then I've plotted that whole book down, like the 250,000 okay, word book that I have. I've plotted it down to the chapter. Like I know, like if there's I think six POVs, how those six POVs play out through these 72 chapters. I've actually plotted it down, and it took me like quite a long time to do it. But then uh, it was fun to like find connections between these two random stories happening, and then how I can converge them, how a theme from this can be resolved in this story, and then like it's like a puzzle coming together, like a jigsaw puzzle. That that's
Yeah,
where I have the most fun with in the writing process.
yeah, yeah. Kind of the same. I used to be a little more frustrated with myself that I haven't got my series out and done yet. But at the same time, I kind of realized not too recently that I the time has allowed me to really find all those connections of all the different points of view and the things to explore. And so at the end of the day, I think ultimately it will be better for that because it's just given me enough time to really figure it all out, the plot and how each character interacts and their backstories. And so it's a big task for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have so you're this one you got a trilogy. Are you gonna write those all the way through or do you wanna are you gonna maybe insert a couple of projects in between the big books?
Let's see. I don't have a plan.
Yeah.
I mean, the rough plan is to just write the trilogy, but I mean, I always have ideas brewing in my mind. So if something interests me, I might just take a break and work on that.
Yeah.
Island of the Dying Goddess was again not a planned book. It was just a NaNoWriMo book that I thought, let's just write it. And it ended up being something that I didn't know I wanted to explore, but ended up being something that I really needed to write. And when I start revealing more things about the book, I will talk about why it's so important to me.
Hmm.
But right now, that's all I'll say.
Yeah. I appreciate that you're willing to also take on important topics and themes within your stories. Is there a reason for that, or are you just wanting to really tell a story that reveals truths about the world?
Um, I think that comes from the filmmaking side for me
Hmm.
because I really started exploring world cinema when I was 18 in 2012. And the stories I found in world cinema and parallel cinema in India, those stories ended up staying with me way more than the blockbusters and the entertainers. Because
Hmm.
there was like this inherent human truth in these films. Those truths are found in Malazan. Those truths are found in Lord of the Rings, and you will find those truths within a lot of these holy books. You know, the Bible, the Gita.
Hmm.
Those books are influential. Malazan is influential because they hold some inherent human truth, and I think that's why I want to be able to create something that says something about the human condition. If it can make you think, ponder over your own life, if it can make you just question something or
Hmm.
just question a particular norm, that okay, this is the norm, but is it right? Can we do better?
Yeah.
And when you ask yourself these questions, you will come back to the answers after having pondered over it for days, years, maybe. And you'll realize that the stories that made you think of these questions have stayed with you, and that's why you keep asking yourself this question. There's a reason why you keep exploring this particular theme or this subject.
Yeah.
And when you finally come to that conclusion, when you finally make those connections, and you're like, okay, I know what I think, I know what I want from this answer, I know what it says about me. It's a very fulfilling feeling, and
Hmm.
I want to be able to give that to my readers. And I think that's the reason I keep coming to these themes. Hopefully, like when I'm done writing these stories, they do have an influence on people, not in a way that I want people to think like me. I just want people to think.
Yeah. I've said this quite a few times about Lord of the Rings. I think part of the reason that that story has endured for so long is because the whole story just is so rooted in just the universal themes about life and being a human and Like everyone can see a little bit of themselves in Frodo and in Aragorn, and we can see a little bit of Gollum. Like every character has kind of this element of humanity to it that I think we can all find something in it to relate to. And I think that's why it's just been able to stick around. I think that's why any story that has stood the test of time, I think that's why, because it's that universal theme that connects to every human, regardless of where you're from or who you are or how you grew up, or they all have something that connects to you.
Absolutely. Agree with you 100%.